Hello and welcome to Run and Become. Today we're going to focus on the hip flexors, which can get very tight when we're running, and ways to ease the strain off. Really excellent stretches. Tight hip flexors are quite common with running. Doesn't necessarily lead to full-blown injury, but they can really hamper your performance. And the hip flexors are running down the front here and into the thigh muscles, so tight IT bands can also affect the hip flexors. You can get tight hip flexors from the repetitive motion of running. Also, if you've got lower back issues, sometimes that's compensating. If you've got weaker glutes, sometimes that's compensating. So today it's all about stretching out our hip flexors. We are filming this during the lockdown due to COVID-19. It turns out that when you lose a tooth during lockdown, there's not much you can do about it. So for the more eagle-eyed amongst you, you will notice there is something missing up here. And it is a slightly cuter look in a little child than it is in a full-grown adult. There we go. So this first stretch is a general stretch. It does target the hip flexor area, but it's good for the rest of the leg as well. And you can turn it into an all-round end-of-run stretch, and I'll show you how. So I like to use a grid. You can have your knee directly onto the floor. I like the grid because then it eases me back into the stretch. This front foot needs to make sure it is in front of the knee or directly below it, certainly not behind it. And then you're going to square up your hips so they are pointing forward, not at an angle. And then you want to do the tummy tuck, so pull this in and straighten out the lower spine, and already you'll feel a stretch here. And then you just ease back or ease forward a little bit until you feel a deep stretch in here. This is stretching into here. It's also having a good effect on the rest of the thigh, and it's stretching into your stomach as well. Once you've got to that point, you want to take some deep breaths and really feel like you're breathing into this area. These are tendons, so you want a gentle, long stretch, no jerking. And there have been studies that have shown that if you think of an area of your body when you're taking deep breaths, your body sends more oxygen to that area. So, nice deep breaths. And then you can exaggerate the stretch by bringing this arm up and diagonally back. And as you do so, you're targeting in there even more. You're also starting to stretch into the psoas muscle that goes deep in the stomach, that often can get tight if the hip flexors are as well, and it's a devil generally to stretch out, so this is a good one. You want to hold that 10-20 seconds, and then you can simply ease back, straighten this foot up, and give yourself a nice hamstring into calf stretch. You hold that for a bit, and then you just pull out the grid, grab hold of your foot at the back, again look forward and tuck your tummy in, and you get a nice stretch of your thigh and IT band. So a good all-round stretch. Then you repeat it on the other side. Always do both sides, even if the pain is just in one. So the next exercise is a deeper stretch, and for this you need your grid. So I'm just going to roll back onto my grid, stick my feet up in the air. You can leave them there for a moment to drain, feels very nice. And then one knee comes into the chest, the other leg straightens away from you, and you want to position this so that it's under your sacroiliac. You're getting a nice sort of bend through your leg, between the upper and lower part of your body, and you can really target this area again of a nice, gentle, deep stretch. And the more you pull this knee in towards you, the more this heel will come away from the floor, but the more you're given the ability to get a deeper stretch in there. And you literally just hold it there and do some deep breathing. Just try to relax your shoulders, relax your facial muscles, deep breathe into your belly and into the hip flexor area, and just let gravity do the rest, pulling your heel down to the ground. And you can slightly reposition the bent knee if you want to, see if that makes any difference. And I love doing this at the end of a long run or at the end of a hard day, just doing this before I get into bed and feeling everything just release. It releases the hip flexor muscle, but it can be a release for your whole body if you just give yourself a little bit of time. And then that leg comes up, and I swap over and do the other side. And the grid's great because it's giving you that extra angle that you simply can't get if you're lying flat on the ground. Now, before in the first exercise, I mentioned the psoas muscle that goes deep into the stomach. If you've had problems with your psoas muscle before, you'll know about it and you'll know how difficult it is to stretch it out. If you sometimes get that feeling of tightness, almost like a stitch in your side, that can be because this is tight. It also can have severe effects on the hip, the mobility of your hip flexors. I speak from a lot of experience. I literally went for a year and a half when I was in my 20s when I couldn't run and even walking was difficult. It took a long time to figure out that the reason was I had a very tight psoas. So this exercise targets the psoas muscle but also the hip flexors. Now facing this way, I'm going to be targeting this leg first. So you want to sit with one foot bent there, well, as you can see, the other foot bent here, and you want your grid here. Now, you turn and put both hands on your grid. At all times, try to keep the resistance in your hips, so you're making the most of the stretch. You don't just come straight over and sag. So I'm pulling myself over, and then I'm going to keep trying to keep this leg actually as back as possible. I'm going to stretch forward. And as I do this, I can feel first the stretch in my psoas and my stomach. It's like your side stomach, but also going into the hip flexor. If I now move my knee back more, and you can use this foot to wedge it back, you'll feel more of a stretch going into the hip flexors and actually into the thigh muscle generally. From here, to intensify, we then come up into like a yoga cobra position and bring the head up, arching this way. So I'm not coming back up, I'm just lifting my head up. And as I do that, that stretch gets intensified. Again, you can push the back leg back further and then breathe into the stretch before coming back up and straightening round. I'm going to show you on the other side now as well. So let's switch my legs round. My hips are facing forward towards you, and I've got the grid on the side. I'm twisting my body around, giving myself a little spine stretch as I do that, spinal twist, and then easing forward, rolling forward. I can feel the stretch into here, and then as I push this leg back and wedge it with my left foot, I get a deeper stretch into the hip flexors as well. And then I'm going to pull my head up, and it probably doesn't look too gainly right now, but it sure does give a good stretch before easing back up again. And there we have it, 3 very effective stretches for your hip flexors, also into your thigh muscles, your psoas muscle, and I find them very helpful. I get very tight hip flexors, so I hope you find them useful also, and see you next time.